Thought Creators, the podcast for financial experts, brought to you by FAB.
Welcome to Thought Creators, the show which examines the issues impacting the world of finance and looks at them through a very human lens. Brought to you by one of the leading banks in the region, First Abu Dhabi Bank. My guest today is a man who makes dreams come true, Suresh Lalwani, who is Head of Coverage with First Abu Dhabi Bank, FAB. Suresh, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scott.
Now, at the top of the show, we like to have a quick look at the headlines. And I'm going to stay in your area of expertise because I saw a headline the other day which really caught my eye. And that was on WAMDA, which said that in the UAE, in October alone, there were $460 million worth of funding raised by startups. And that means that the UAE is now leading the region. Does that gel with the activity that you're seeing in the market?
It really gels well with what we actually see on ground happening. On ground, we see a lot of business activity. When we talk to our clients, they tell us that they've got lots of projects on hand. They have their order books are full, and they're really enjoying the sort of the growth that the overall economy is enjoying. And there's a lot of action on the tech side, thanks to the push that COVID has given, to the digital initiatives and the digital sort of transformation in all companies, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a retail outlet or a wholesale outlet or a distribution setup or a services setup. Every company has got a push to go digital. Right.
And you're really seeing that spirit of innovation in almost every sector, are you?
Absolutely. Somebody who was sort of running a mom and pop store, or somebody who was running, let's say, a warehouse distribution, is also thinking that how can I go digital, right? Because that's what people want, right? Ease of transferring goods, ease of transferring money. So that is actually what is driving, the overall sort of growth in the startup sector.
What's really interesting to me, and I feel it, and I'm a startup myself, is that when we look around the world and we look at inflation, we look at rising interest rates, we look at the cost of doing business, we look around the world, maybe the forecast for startups doesn't look so good. Trading conditions are going to be a bit difficult. Here in the UAE, it feels like we're going to fare a little better. Why is that, you think?
And particularly UAE and Saudi are two countries in the GCC which are experiencing great growth, a massive increase in the GDP, right? And that's because, of course, oil has a big role to play here. But then even the governments are investing a lot back in the country, which includes, let's say, infrastructure-related projects in the oil and gas. Now, all those big projects, they trickle down. They trickle down and right to the level of SMEs, who are, looking up, to do jobs in the country. So if you talk to anybody in the SME sector, right, they're all, so for example, it is amazing to see how an oil and gas sector, project is related to an events company because any new product launch, it may be, let's say, quite high tech or maybe to do with oil, but an events launch results into an events company enjoying some sort of turnover or revenue of that share. So it works, SMEs, the whole project values, and it trickles down to the lowest level, and that's why you see a lot of activity happening in the country. So this is where we see a lot of positivity coming in.
From when you talk to investors, I mean, if I look at the UK and what happened in sort of recent months, we saw lots of investment kind of flood out of the UK when they thought there was lots of instability on the horizon, particularly with the budgets. Whereas we look to the UAE, stability is almost woven into the DNA of the business landscape here. We've got crime is something that we literally don't think about. If you're a family man, if you're an investor, bringing your children into the country, I think Abu Dhabi was voted the safest city 2 years running. How important to investors is that stability? Granted now that an entrepreneur can even qualify for a 10-year golden visa.
Well, that's a big thing for an entrepreneur. And what we saw, families, business owners in let's say Indian subcontinent or maybe Europe, they're coming up with their business ideas and their business models into this country because of of course, the stability and the security that the country gives to the business owners. They have, the business ideas are being well received over here because, it's a very cosmopolitan place. The golden visa is a big thing because that gives you, you think long. So once you're sure that you're going to be staying in this country and the government recognizes that, right, you can buy your property, you can invest in commercial real estate.
Yep.
All this is driving, business and growth all across. So if you look at it, it is not just the residential market that is gaining, with the investors coming in. It's even the commercial hubs and the commercial districts like Jebel Ali, like Kizad, like Musaffa, ICAD, right? All these districts are seeing an influx of businesses coming into the country. And these are not, tech is coming in. But even the more brick and mortar kind of businesses, for example, commercial logistics, right? Somebody to handle logistics between the port and, let's say, hopefully whenever we have, soon we will have Etihad Rail also coming in.
Yes.
Right. So there you need logistics companies. So there is an increase in the companies, setting up warehouses in Abu Dhabi. So we see all these increases and growth in the economy, and we're happy to say that we are partnering with all these businesses, and many of them we have been funding also. So it's great.
I'm interested, almost like, as a storyteller, I always like to ask the question why. And we saw just recently, again in the headlines, the UAE government talk about their Entrepreneurial Nation 2.0 program, where they're trying to foster and create 8,000 more SMEs by 2030. Why strategically is it so important to the UAE to foster this dynamic climate of entrepreneurship?
See, entrepreneurship is great, right? I mean, and if you see all across, the entrepreneurial spirit in this country has been great. And now with the push of, from the government, it is going to see different heights. See, entrepreneurship drives economy. Mm-hmm. It brings in a business, let's say, hires, let's say 20, 30, 50 people. There are 50 households being, living and sort of living in a society. So they need everything. They need a house, they need offices, they need buses, they need schools, they need hospitals, they need restaurants, they need supermarkets to shop at. So if you nurture entrepreneurship, automatically your entire society, your community, and your country grows. So this is like the starting point. Yes, it is not easy, right? It needs a lot of support. It needs a lot of push right from the top. But it is possible, and it'll take a little while. But yes, of course, we will get there, and we should get there.
So that's the macro why. Down to the micro why, and basically to people like me who are starting their own businesses. Why do you think? Because it feels like entrepreneurship's never been more attractive. It's a really sort of golden age, particularly here in the UAE, for entrepreneurship. Why do you think there are so many people right now wanting to kind of leap off that cliff and take a chance on themselves? And when we look at it, it's from the 20-somethings who got that tech idea to people that look like me that have worked for other people for decades who suddenly went, life's a bit too short. Let's do our own thing. But what do you think is driving that confidence for people to kind of bet on themselves a bit?
What drives confidence in people is, of course, they've got great ideas. But when a businessman sees that this is a place where I can actually bring in my idea and convert that dream into a reality, right? When they see that comfort in the country, when they see that sort of the entire ecosystem helping or working towards sort of helping and supporting this business person, right? That's where you see confidence, and that's where you see people, doing more and more in terms of business, coming from other countries and setting up outlets and shops over here. Now, again, if you look at UAE, we are 10 million people, right? But we have direct access to Saudi. Mm-hmm. We have direct access to other GCC countries. We're very close to Africa, not very far from Europe. Coming in and out of UAE is very easy. We've got the best airline in the world. So all this is sort of helping the business owners to sort of come in and set up shops here. If you look at our geography, we are right in the middle of east and west, right? So ships can come here very comfortably. If you look at our ports are fantastic, whether it is Kizad or Jebel Ali, right? There are other countries who are more strategically better located on the map, but because our infrastructure is great, right? People prefer to come and set up, let's say, manufacturing outlets and trading hubs in UAE rather than going to any other country. Because a ship, if you see, when a ship sails from, let's say, China or India, it sort of comes into in order to come into UAE and Jebel Ali or Kizad, it has to take it takes additional 2 days more, for the ship to come inside. However, the infra into the country is so fantastic. Where do you get a port, let's say Jebel Ali port or Kizad port, which is so close to the airport? You can literally bring in goods, and in few hours you can ship it out, via an aircraft out of this country. It does not happen in any part of the world because the government has really taken care of their infrastructure so well that this is all leading to UAE becoming a great place to do business.
You must have heard so many different stories, so many dreamers bringing their ambitions to your door. Are there any common themes that have driven those people to again leap off the cliff? What's the kind of the secret sauce that you see? What are the qualities that inspire people to set out on that adventure? Because it's quite an adventure to launch your own business.
It is definitely not easy, right? You have to have the passion, you have to have the drive for your idea or product or whatever you may be thinking about. Just to give you an example, during COVID, I was part of this incubator where this was a women-only incubator where these 8-10 women, they got together and they were thinking of setting up a business idea. Now, when the world was suffering from COVID, here you've got these 8 different business people, coming up with their ideas and wanting to launch at a time when the world is thinking of sort of shutting down and closing off.
For a startup, sometimes it can seem quite daunting at the start of the process. So you've got the dream, you've got the business plan potentially, you've had the idea. Where do you get that money? You say we'll get the financing. Where do you get that money? And where do you fall on the whole kind of debate around debt versus equity? What's the right stages in that process for people to borrow or people to seek equity? What's your experience? Because obviously you've been, at the forefront of that for some time.
Sure. So Scott, what happens is, there are only 2 ways to get money. You can get money either by way of equity, or you can get money by way of debt, right? Typically, what I've actually seen, in life is that people start off with friends, family, or savings, right? Their own savings, or they borrow from
bootstrapping.
Yeah, bootstrapping. Yeah. They're really bootstrapped. Keep it very tight and locked for the first few years of the company, right? Once, let's say, you've established and you have revenue coming in, right? You stay within equity, right? Once you've got revenue coming in, then you start to sort of borrow money from the banks. Yeah. Take a little bit of debt, because debt helps you to put turbo engines, on your company. Your revenue shoots up because it's like your $100 plus, let's say, you borrow 50 from the bank. So it's $150, right? On your business, you'd be making, let's say, a gross profit of about, say, 20%. You would pay the banks, whatever, 6, 7, 8%. But the money that you make, let's say, even from borrowed capital is far higher than what you would, do it from your own equity. So it's good to take a little bit of debt after you've established your company and after you've sort of established the revenue, coming in, revenue kicking in, right, in the business. You think about selling off your company, or maybe you take on equity when you realize that, yes, this company can really be scaled, the product can be scaled, to much wider and much larger sort of scale. You do it after 4 or 5 years, right? Right. Because that'll give you the best value. It'll give you the best return for your time and efforts that you've put into the business.
I'm making notes here for my own personal. So stage 1, look at friends and family, look at maybe a little bit of equity, get the business on the road. Important to be generating revenue, maybe even profits before you go to the bank. Is it get your business up and running?
Yes. See, there are different views, right? I come from a very, very traditional sort of a typical credit mentality.
Yeah.
And typically banks like to see profit company that is making a profit, it may not be a net profit, it may be a cash generating profit,
Yeah.
right? But at least it has to generate cash,
Yeah.
because otherwise it becomes a valuation game, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're just looking at sort of flipping that company in some time, which is, as a banker, I can tell you this is something not, something that, sort of we don't endorse that.
Well, I've seen that around the world as well, and I think it's interesting. It feels like we're moving to a new sort of phase, because we've seen that phase where, we talk about the hockey stick growth. We've seen that phase where it's all about, get investors in, flood it with users, no matter how you do it, and then flip it. Here it feels like we're beginning to look more at building sustainable businesses that can actually thrive in the long term. So you think, like, come to the banks to as you say, pour jet fuel on that business plan when you're ready to kind of scale to the next level, and then thus increase your valuation. And then, if you're looking to exit, sort of 5 to 7 years. So don't get rich quick.
Yep.
Build something sustainable.
Absolutely, Scott. I mean, if you just Google the amount of failures that you see, startups failing, and then large names, big names, right? Now, why does that happen? How does that happen? Because what I see is, what we've seen in the market is that, like what you said, absolutely right, that people are just sort of trying to fill in users, and then you sell the company, you flip it over. That's something, it's not sustainable, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody eventually will lose. Yeah. Period. Somebody will eventually lose. And what I have seen, and as a lender, for the last 20 odd years, businesses that generate profit, they have a sustainable, product which sort of goes a long way, where we're generating profits and revenue. Those are the businesses in future, when they are sort of selling off their shares and equity, they get the best value, and they don't fail. I mean, businesses ideally should be forever.
Well, I mean, we on the last edition of this podcast, we talked to Sharjeel, who's your Chief Sustainability Officer, and it feels like sustainability is kind of, again, in your DNA. You say it's traditional, but I think there's a lot of traditions, or shall we say authenticity, and values that moving forward, particularly in the age of ESG, are almost like license to operate, and are the DNA of success, like looking for that long-term stability rather than that quick win.
Absolutely, Scott. If you just study it little deeper, and if you sort of look at it from a bird's eye view, lending to these SMEs is sustainable finance.
Okay.
It is sustainable finance because it is part of the overall, because that's how you build and grow communities and societies, right? You've got sustainable businesses, and that results into sustainable, let's say, income and families and everything, right? So that is definitely part of our the way we do business, and we definitely want to partner with more and more businesses that are sustainable, profitable, and well capitalized.
I mean, you talk about building societies and you talk about building communities. I mean, the Minister of Economy, I think it was only just in the last week, was quoted as saying that now 95% of operating businesses in the UAE are SMEs. And then I saw another headline, which was the Mohammed bin Rashid Fund had helped more than 1,200 SMEs secure, again, nearly $40 million worth of funding to get on the road over the last 5 years. Sometimes it feels like there's actually more support out there than perhaps entrepreneurs know there is, particularly from the government side of things.
Absolutely. There's a lot of support that is available today from the government. Some of the funds you mentioned about, one is Mohammed bin Rashid Innovation Fund. Yeah. We've got lots of other government partners and initiatives under which we have partnered with them, and we're looking at businesses slightly differently. Right, there could be an angle of ESG into a business. There could be an angle, of a business that is, or an industry that the government wants to support. For example, agri-tech, right? Getting our food, on the plate should be the most important thing in the country, right? And that's what we are supporting in a big way.
Yeah.
Along with the government funds and initiatives, water, right? Solar, these are the areas, pharma, medical. So these are the areas where the government has got special funding available for businesses, which are into these areas, because as a country we don't want to be sort of.
So it seems like we're mapping back to very human needs. We've had lots of social entrepreneurs and that sort of thing, but now we're looking at technology that really goes back to serving humanity.
Absolutely. And this is not just sort of, we're not just saying, we're actually giving money. If you have a great idea into any of these sectors, you will get finance. There is finance available, right? Which was not the case 10 years ago. 10 years ago, unless you're not profitable and you don't have capital and you don't have, it was very difficult to get finance. But today, okay, that's one area that, where you talk about commercial finance, that's where the banks will finance you. But if you are one of these priority sectors, if your business is into one of these priority sectors, you can get financing even if you are not sort of profitable, or if your capital is sort of slightly weaker, you can still get financing under these sectors.
If you're working towards a kind of common goal of creating value and making a real impact in society.
Absolutely.
I love that. Well, that's inspiring to start with. I'm going to ask you a question which I've faced in my entrepreneurial journey, and I know that many entrepreneurs do. Is there such a thing? We keep talking about finance. Is there such a thing as the wrong type of money? Sometimes we can be tempted to take either debt or investors that are not right for us.
Yes. So, I'd like to talk about two areas specifically into this. One is, let's say, wrong type of financing happens when, let's say, you borrow money, for a short period money, which, let's say, for example, you borrow today and you got to pay it in 6 months, but you actually invest that money in building a commercial real estate, which is, let's say, going to give you returns over let's say 7 or 8 years. Now that's wrong financing, right? That's one area when you can sort of mismanage your sort of debt, financing. The other is when you have equity partners, who just give you cash, right? And they are there sort of to check on you on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis, and are just interested in when are you going to make that revenue, or when are you going to be making your profit, or when are you going to be making those number of users, right?
So it comes back to those chasing that hockey stick dream again.
Absolutely. I have seen businesses where, who are doing great, we were financing them, and then here comes, let's say, an investor in the business with a lot of cash because it was a great brand, right?
Yeah.
And in 2 years, they open up so many outlets. From 18 outlets, they become 36 outlets. And then after 2 years, I met with them again, and they were busy shutting down outlets. Because that was not the right scale at which they should be operating, right? So they really had to scale it down so that they are at their optimal scale of operations. So money, again, like I told you in the past, money is well, you'll get money, right? If your idea is great, you will get money, but you should know how and where to sort of spend that money and use it.
So don't get greedy in effect, and take a breath and make sure it's right for you and your values and your vision for your business.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, you did talk about you'd seen lots of businesses fail in the past. I've read the common wisdom, which is around sort of 9 out of 10 startups fail at the first hurdle. Do you agree with that statistic based on what you've seen? And also, what are the fundamental things that entrepreneurs can do to make sure that they're in the 1 in 10 who succeed rather than 90% who fall by the wayside?
I think the number would be much better in UAE.
Okay.
Right? It may not be 9 out of 10. It may be, 6 or 7 out of 10. I don't have the exact number, but I feel that, I see much more successful businesses in the country rather than the ones which are failing.
Okay.
Right? That's one. Second is the reason why, those businesses are successful is, of course, you have to have the right passion, the right drive and stuff, but your product has to be such that the market is willing to pay for it. Right, that's very important, right? And revenue brings in all that sort of validity, right? If the market is willing to pay for your product and there is value in it, right? I don't think failure will be there because if you're making revenue, you will eventually make profit as well. And once you make profit, then why that's a success, right?
Suresh, this is kind of unfair because I could keep picking your brains for hours on end, but time's against us. But I always ask our guests to make some sort of forward-facing predictions about what's going, what's down the road for us. In terms of startups and SMEs, I mean, we've seen VAT come in. We've seen, obviously, the bounce check laws change. On the horizon, we've got corporate tax coming. Nobody ever really enjoys the word tax, but we know it's one of life's two certainties. What's that going to mean for SMEs moving forward? Is it something that we need to be apprehensive about, or are there benefits to it?
Scott, I personally believe governance and these changes that you just mentioned, have got a great benefit. Like if I would just sort of tell you, 10 years back there was no VAT, there was no AECB, there was no credit bureau. There was no, if you bounce a check, you could be in jail, right? And now there is corporate tax. So these are four, large, big things that have happened in the areas of business, right? If you talk to any business, right, when VAT was coming in, everyone was sort of very, very, jittery and apprehensive in terms of, what's going to happen. But VAT is there, and actually VAT is helping us, right? In the same way, I personally believe that corporate tax is going to be an enabler, right?
Unpack that for me a little more then. What's the benefit of corporate tax?
Yeah. A country needs a good society, right? And society has to be built from money. It doesn't come for free, right? The security that we enjoy, right? The freedom that we enjoy over here, it has a price to be paid, right? And that price is paid by the government because the government works too hard to sort of bring this, all this for us. Now, if we pay a certain amount of tax, it is actually a good thing because all the benefits that we enjoy, are going to be sustainable. Better roads. And in addition to this, if you know that you're going to be taxed, right, there is reporting.
Yeah.
Right. It brings in authenticity. Yeah. Right. For example, when there is tax and everyone's, you can chase your receivables better. There is that transparency into your financials comes into play.
Yeah.
Right. You can, it'll be easier for banks and lenders to bring in finance available on the table. It is easy to evaluate. It will encourage open banking, right? Because let's say if I know how much tax you're paying, right, I can calculate backwards in terms of what's your revenue and what's your sales, right? And that's a true and genuine economy. Now, a 9% corporate tax, I mean, if I can talk on behalf of everybody, if I'm allowed to, it's not a very, very big thing, right? Yeah. Many businesses are going to be okay, absolutely fine with this.
So you talked there about kind of that open banking. You talked about these taxes creating this environment. We've got the Etihad Credit Bureau there now as well. What do you see for the future of financing for SMEs moving forward? How we've seen it accelerate over the past 10 years. It is much, much easier now to set up a business here in the UAE. What do you see looking forward over the next short to medium term?
So what I see in terms of availability of finance, with these governance pieces in play, you could, it'll be easier to evaluate businesses, and finance will be available in a much better way. So just to give you some examples, at my bank, and if I talk, on behalf of, let's say, the banking industry per se, you can see that there are finance available, let's say in the form of point of sale loans, payment gateways. Gone are those days when bank statements were being checked on a manual basis. Now there are bank statement readers. We are using the OCR technology really well to sort of read the paper and do the analysis on an Excel really, really fast. And Excel is one example, but there are other technologies that we can use, and that's great. We look at the VAT returns, and we are able to sort of define what the turnover of the company is and decide on the lending. Right, there is trade finance available for businesses, which is your LCs, TRs, invoice discounting, check discounting. There is commercial real estate available. There is supply chain available, right? And with all these governance coming into play, These were the limits, or these were the kind of funding were usually available in the past only for the large corporates. That has changed.
Yeah.
Right? And where I see it getting even better is that this will percolate down to even the micro and the smaller businesses. Right? Not just the emerging corporates, but even the smaller businesses will be able to enjoy supply chain financing with all these, because of these governance, initiatives coming into play. So it looks like, in future we'll have, let's say, all these, a computer will analyze all these sort of information, and lending could be available much easier, much faster, and in a much more efficient way.
Is mentoring and advice almost as valuable as hard cash?
It is. On many occasions, actually more than cash, giving the right advice and giving the right direction to business owners works better than even cash, because cash somebody will give, but the right advice, how to do something in a correct way, is something that business owners sometimes they really sort of struggle to get that. So, for example, advice on legal framework and documentation. How do you do that? When is it that you could use bank finance without any kind of high charges and high costs, right? What kind of finance to use? So we do a lot of mentoring. We do a lot of, at FAB, we have specific programs under which we sort of spend time with our clients and engage with them and sort of mentor them and sort of give them our insights in terms of how we see the world. And for example, we did a session where we spoke about the interest rates, the geopolitics that is happening around the world, and how is that impacting their businesses, and what sort of strategies they should adopt in order to sort of take advantage of the situation or sort of keep themselves protected.
So again, talking about that kind of mountain that we as startups have to climb, sometimes we're quite nervous to ask for help. But for example, and in my case this was true, absolutely no savings whatsoever, but some project that we're super passionate about, should we not be afraid to actually come and talk to, give me the FAB example, talk to you guys about, okay, how am I, I haven't got savings, but how am I going to get this on the road? And when is the right time for me to borrow, and how am I going to do that?
Sure. So what we do is, we connected with a lot of incubators and, government funds where, let's say, for example, if you don't have enough equity to do business, sort of we'll connect you with the right people, and, that'll sort of help you in sort of building that equity and setting up your business.
So you're there almost at the start of the process, and then hold the hand all the way through as the company scales. And then that's when you're saying, right, now's the right time for you to access the debt to then supercharge your growth.
Absolutely. So initially, the incubators help you with the guidance, with the knowledge, and there, you can even sort of mingle with a lot of investors. We, for example, at FAB, we participate in many fintech events, many investor meets, where sort of we do connect our clients with investors where who could sort of bring in that seed capital that you need, or maybe Series A or B, whatever that is required for you to grow, and have the capital in the right place. So that's possible. And once you've got the capital and you've taken the business to a certain level, that's when the bank gets involved in terms of financing you.
Suresh, I could talk to you all day. Unfortunately, it's mic drop moment. Inspiring and insightful comments today, so thank you very much. And if you've enjoyed today's show and you want to subscribe and hear more from the Thought Creators podcast, please hit subscribe. Please come back. We're on podcasts, all the available channels, and on YouTube. Please follow us for more. And Suresh, once again, thank you for being with us on Thought Creators today.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for having me.
Thought Creators, the podcast for financial experts, brought to you by FAB.